Hey everybody, I'm Warlord FARIX. This is my sparring partner Turek, and today I'm going to go through the third part of my video on stabbing. The third part of my series on stabbing. The first two parts I'll put in the description for you guys, so you're not missing out on anything. And today's topic is going to be really wordy, but it's stabbing people who do not want to be stabbed, more or less. So when you stab someone and they get that feeling in their gut like, that was horrible, never letting that happen again, how do you stab that person? How do you continue to stab them? Or at least, how do you use the fact that you have stabbed the soul out of them to your advantage? So I have 3 points to cover today. So the first way that you can keep stabbing or use the stabs to your advantage is to force it, right? So if I stab, first fight of the day, we come up and I'm just gonna land my first stab, right? He makes the sound, he goes, and then, has that unpleasant experience of, okay, never again. So when that happens, one of the ways that you can deal with him not wanting to be stabbed anymore is to force it, right? So normally you come in and you stab, they hard deny, they put their hand in the way, they're doing anything they can to not be stabbed. Maybe they just skinny out of it, as I like to call it. They kind of stick their hips back. Exactly. They do something or everything to avoid being stabbed. So the way you force it is you start out not stabbing, right? So instead of coming in and stabbing or like even threatening a stab, I'm going to come in fairly normal, relaxed guard, and I'm going to throw something really hard. Maybe not really hard, but I'm going to throw something assertive to their sword. I can throw it up here, I can throw it here. Typically I like to go right above the hand. But the point is that when you throw here and you leave your sword there, you're not pulling it back right away. You're not block striking. You're going to put it there and leave it there. So in this situation, I'm a little bit taller than Turek, and I'm a little bit stronger, I think. We'll find out. But so I've been able to force his sword down and out of the way, right? So now I have this position. He really can't throw back up to my body because I have all of his sword underneath all of my sword, and my hand is above his hand. Now, if he was to pull back, he could go around the opposite side, but that takes time, and in the time he's doing that, it gives me the opportunity to stab him. If he tries to force it, if he does try to throw up and in anyway,
that way,
think hip wrap. Yeah.
Yep.
So if he tries to throw anyway, you just stab him. That's right. So you're getting your entrance. You're taking that step in. You're forcing their sword out. You're keeping your sword there, in control of the situation. And then no matter where their body is, it's attached to their arm. Your sword's already up to their elbow at this point, basically. You're just throwing the stab. But the step in, when you do that, is very important, because if I just throw it and I assert dominance here, I still have to lunge, more or less, to hit him. So as you're throwing that first one, you're taking that step in, and now my hand is on the easy part to manipulate of his sword, and now I can throw it in like that.
I want to get control back.
Exactly, exactly. And even if you're not stronger than your opponent necessarily, if I come out to the tip here, I have all of the leverage, right? Even if John was to manipulate my sword, because I threw under, I can try and stop him, but he has all of the leverage, right? I'm not, even if I'm fighting him, I'm going to lose that fight. It's more of a leverage issue, it's less of a strength issue. That to say, they have less control of the sword the further up you go, then they have more control closer to the hand you go. So that's a little bit on forcing the stab, right? So then you can go into faking the stab. So once you get that first good gut-wrenching stab, they go into I don't want to be stabbed mode. A lot of the time, it doesn't take much more than this for them to have a very visceral reaction to what just happened, right? So if I come in and I fake like this, and they throw something low, they get into a low guard, they take that step back, most of the time I can just hit them in the forearm, and then I can throw a stab if I want to, but I don't have to, right? And even if I wanted to follow up that fake with a stab, most of the time they'll do that literally low denial guard, so just come back over the top of the step, stab them anyway. Once they get that first stab off, it just becomes once you get that first stab off, it just becomes a lot easier to fake a stab than to actually throw a stab at that point. Like I said, if you get a good one and they make the noise, you get a very visceral reaction to your fake stabs, and you can build off of that with other fakes and things like that. the last way I have to get your stabs to keep landing is distract. So if I throw that first round, throw that really gut pounding stab,
What? It's yours. Okay.
I can just stop throwing stabs for a while, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's fighting computer has a certain amount of RAM, right? You have a certain amount of things that you can hold on to during a fight, and the longer you fight, the things will start dropping off, right? So if I throw that first hard stab in the first one, we come in, we start block striking, I start playing a little more range, or maybe I want to close and just throw those. He wins one, I win one, he wins one. We get the end of our first to 10, it's 9-9. That gives me a lot of opportunity to just come in, pretend like I'm going to do what I've been doing, and then throw that stab, right? You can combine that with force and fake and things like that, but the point is that you're lulling them into, okay, it was a fluke, okay, it was a one-off, okay, I have sufficiently prepared for this. I'm playing range differently. They know I can block the stab.
Threatened with a lot of other things. They're blocking in different places. Yeah.
Right. You're keeping them preoccupied. You're just distracting them, and distracting them from it. You're just lulling them into that false sense of security that, okay, I've blocked it enough. I've dealt with enough other things, or even they've just kind of completely forgotten about it.
That's
for their short-term memory.
That first noise is no longer around after those 10 rounds because the shoulder's red and the forearms have been snagged, so you're not thinking about that anymore. Yeah.
And then when it matters, last fight, your first to 10, last finals of the tournament, it's 3-3 or however your kingdom scores their tournaments. Then you throw that stab because you know you can land it, and they've most likely it's not in their active recall anymore. So yeah, those are my 3 methods for people, who kind of stay in the fight. But now I hear you asking, what if they back up? What if they make distance? What if they just won't get close to me anymore because they didn't like what happened the first time, right?
We become cowardly after we make the noise, and you lessen the chances of the noise being made.
Exactly.
So you do that with your feet, and you stay back here. You're like, nope, keep that away.
Exactly.
So how do you deal with that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can still use force, fake, and distract, but it requires a lot more footwork, and usually also your goal in the end is to put them in the corner of the ring, right? Because once they hit a certain amount of backing up, they can't back up anymore. Whether that's the wall of the ring, the corner of the ring, whatever that might be, they can no longer do the thing that is keeping them alive, and they will have to stand and deliver at a certain point. So you're forcing the fight into what you want it to be, rather than letting them continue to back up space and throw shots. So you can still do all 3, right? So you can still force the fight. So if I'm going to force, right, I don't want to necessarily, so if I know they're going to back up, I'm not going to come in here, so hold on, reset real quick. So I'm not going to come in here and try and force their thing, right? Because if they take that step back, they're gonna punish me on the arm, or take a step back, block, and then come back in, something like that. So if I know they're going to back up, typically my strategy becomes more of I need to get to one side or the other, right? I don't want to go on a straight line, because if they're backing up in a straight line and I'm advancing in a straight line, they have the advantage in the fact that they can keep the same amount of space between them and me in most normal circumstances, right? Which again, like if you get them into the corner, can't do that anymore. That's the easy answer. But if they're backing up and I'm coming at them with a force, right? So normally it would be force, go straight, but if they're backing up, taking distance, they're gonna snipe me. So my best advice in this situation to force it is when you make contact that first time, they're gonna back up, right? So I'm taking that small step, they take a fair amount of step back. So we're basically back where we started, right? So in this situation, you do small reset, forward, side of the gun. So I do a force, take a step, they take a step back. So the next step, you take another step, go offside, and they can take a step back.
I was going that way, and now there is less distance.
Right. So there's a little bit less distance because you went offside, and also their sword is still positioned on where I used to be, right? So if you can catch them in that moment, you can get the stab. Obviously, throw the arm block, something to make space, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. But when you take that offside step after trying to force it, typically they go, okay, he wants to grind or whatever, so they back up, reset, and then your second step isn't straight, so you've changed the distance between you and your opponent, right? So that leads me into fake. So you can still fake into a stab, or fake the stab, if they're backing up and getting out of the way, right? It is a little bit different though. So normally, when we get to this point, all I would have to do is kind of this motion, right? I wouldn't necessarily have to take a step. I probably would, because I like to go forward. But you can just kind of do this motion, and then you'll get them to sweep out of the way, right?
Yeah.
So if they're backing up, making space, they're probably still going to do that sweep motion, but they're going to be way back there, right? Or at least a step or two back there. Way is an exaggeration, but you'll get to that. You'll get them back there. So your first stab, you're going to want to take a pretty decent step, right? Because you know they're already going to take a step back. So you take a step, they back up. Then your second one is going to be a lunge from here, right? So they think that they've cleared it, and they're keeping that distance, right?
Yeah.
So you're not playing, So it's not like a 1-2 beat, right? Your lunge comes on the down beat. So you're not necessarily waiting for them to respond, but because you're going to use your predictive text, for lack of a better word, to just go for it, right? So you throw the lunge, they back up, they do their sweep, they do lunge in.
Yep.
So you will have to play with the timing of it. Everyone fights a little differently, but faking the stab with a step and then going into a lunge on that down beat is the important part, right? Because most people who are backing up and trying to make range, will move as you move, right? If I take a step forward, you take a step back. If I take a step forward, you take a step back.
Yeah.
So you could lunge in straight out of the gate, but if they take a step back, they're not always in range, and they have they're giving themselves time to throw there. Whereas if you take a step, they take a step, and then you lunge, as their backward step is finishing, you're playing that downbeat and you're covering the distance before they get another step back.
Interesting.
Which brings me to distract, right? So this is harder to do in a meaningful way, right? So if the catalyst for them switching to a ranged position, right? Them, backing up, throwing those ranging shots, was the stab, right?
Yeah.
The best way might be the answer you're looking for might be distract, right? Pick a different target, pick a different method, right? Don't throw that stab, because if that puts them into that defensive mode and you're not prepared for it, or it starts working for them, they're either going to get stuck in that mode because it's working, or they'll go back to what's more comfortable when they feel more comfortable, right? So again, you're lulling them into that false sense of security. You're getting them back into the fight by not throwing the thing that triggered that, right? So it's not a one-for-one. Like I said, everyone fights different. There's a bunch of different styles out there. There's a bunch of different ranges. People fight all kinds of different ways. But if they start doing that after receiving a really hard stab, and it makes them fight different, you distracting might be your best method to go. Just not doing that again for a while until it matters and you know that you want to do it again.
Good.
Which leads me to kind of people who just always fight rangy, right? Because there are those people out there that will make distance, they choose not to engage, all they want to do is counter what you want to do, right? And a lot of that comes into, there's not an easy answer, but the answer is your setups, right? Your distance. As I was talking about with the step then lunge, it's a lot of that. It's 2 and 3 step processes to get from point A to point B, because they're setting booby traps along the way and you can't walk in a straight line, right? So for someone who's always backing up, who's always playing range, who's very tall while doing so, is another thing that can really help that kind of style. So come out just a little bit. Okay, so if I know someone's gonna back up, right? If I know that they're not gonna want to have anything to do with the fight unless they can just barely tap me on the forearm, you can throw that power shot, right? Typically, that will kind of stun them a little bit or like scare them off. So if you do that power shot, they might see that little stutter he had to do when I took that step forward. You can put someone into a recovery mode, for lack of a better word, You smack their sword out of position. They're like, oh, my sword's out of position. Let me back up and reset.
Yeah.
And you take that step forward. Or if you can really catch them off guard, just do the lunge then, right? Because you're putting them in a, okay, hold on, let me reset myself before we actually fight, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, so before the real fight starts, let me back up and reset. Which is not a bad way to go, but if that's all they're doing, you're going to have to engage them on that backup and reset beat, right? Because they're really not going to give you a chance otherwise. Another thing that can be done is I like to look very nonchalant. I like to, so like obviously, you know, I've talked about fighting sword out, getting the maximum range for your buck. But if they're backing up all the time and they think I'm in range, they're just going to keep backing up. So a lot of the times what I'll do is I will just kind of hang out with my sword right here, because I have a lot of choices from right here. Like I can come up here, I can throw the stab, like just from here to here. But I look defenseless, or I look mostly harmless, right? Obviously I still have a sword in my hand, so they're not going to like let me just walk right up to them. But they're going to let me get a lot closer, maybe to the point where I can go all the way past them, rather than if I have my sword out, they're not even going to let me get that close.
Yeah, the no man's land becomes the distance between, and like here, I'm in your threat range, absolutely.
Yeah, just one step.
Yeah, like that's, and that happens so fast. But here, like it is really apparent. I know that I'm in the threat range, but the only, I know I'm in your threat range because I've died here a lot, but it doesn't appear that way, maybe to you guys. But
yeah, and
thank
like
you for letting
the
me
more
explain my understanding.
Absolutely. But the more nonchalant, the
Yeah.
more like I'm fine being here. You are, that kind of lulls them into, okay, this is fine. Obviously, you can only get so much from that gambit, right? Because as soon as you do something wild, or like you get to here and then they're like, okay, I can't let them get that close anymore, right? There are limits to how far you can stretch that, but if you only need to win 2 out of the 3 fights, that might be enough to get you through if they just keep backing up and there's no ring, there's no Reeves enforcing any kind of boundary, right? Which, Reeves, love you to death. Please start using rings if you don't already. Much appreciated.
Circles are fine. Boxes,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a box.
No, it doesn't have to be a box. Circles, squares, pentagons, octagons, maybe? Anyway.
Depends on how many sticks you have. They're really helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of my video on stabs here. And just, you know, closing kind of a lot of topics covered in this one. But if you have any questions, anything like that, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook. I go by Ben FARIX over there. Feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, share with your friends.
Thank you.
Really trying to build my channel here. I've got some talking to people and really exploring what I can do with this YouTube space. Appreciate all the love that I've gotten for the last few videos on the stab series. Let me know what you want to see moving forward. If you have any topics you want covered, leave it in the description. Message me on Facebook. You know, drop it in Serious Foam Fighters. I'll probably drop this video in there as well. Yeah, I'm Warlord FARIX. This is my sparring partner and great human being Turk. We appreciate your time. Thanks for coming.